Hello, hello, everybody. There we go. We are finally live. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I am just opening this up so that if you have any comments, I do get to see them. And so today what we're going to be talking about is how to teach linear functions. And not give up your whole life trying to fit all of this in, because it is a great deal of content. So let me just, before we get started, I am going to make sure I can see your comments. There we go. And I do see that we've got some people showing up. I'm so excited about that. I would love to invite you to introduce yourself. Let me know where you're from. And I think I've got it where I can see the comments coming in here, although I don't see the old ones. So I might just click it on my phone. But if you don't mind taking just a quick minute, letting me know where you're from, maybe, and also I would love to know where you're from, and do your kids struggle with mastering everything that there is to master within linear functions? Just a quick thumbs up or a yes would let me know. If you think that this information, how to work through all of the information in linear functions and not lose your pace, not lose your spot on all of, it seems like we can lose a lot of days. Like you reteach something here and you use 2 days for this topic here. So staying on pace, and then also not spending a ton of time at home, which I know sounds like a tall order. I'm just pulling this up so I can see all your wonderful comments. I'm so excited about that. And so if you think that will be helpful to any of your friends, your Facebook friends, feel free to hit share. That just helps us to reach more people, and that would be great. So if you get a chance, I do see that there's a bit of a lag between me talking and Facebook putting it live. But if you do get a chance to introduce yourself, or even, I know a lot of people are still teaching at 2:30, and if you need some extra, if you're watching the replay, please know that I am still going to be looking at all of these comments, and I will be making sure to answer all of them. Okay, there we go. Now I've got the comments up. So thank you so much. Let's go ahead. It is about 2:33 my time here, Eastern. And so I do want to jump right in because I know some of you are fitting this in a prep or before a sporting outfit. I know we used to get done at like 2:35, so I wouldn't be surprised to see these numbers of viewers drop up and down. But I love seeing your comments. A lot of times I answer them after, just because I can put more thought into them. If you have some questions, I'd love to hear from you. So the first thing I want to start off at, what is the big picture? What are we trying to teach with linear functions? Because linear functions, as well as quadratic functions, and we've got quadratics and exponentials, and then all sorts of other interesting functions for the students too. So we have piecewise and all of that stuff. But when we're talking about, for me, it's the second unit of the year, linear functions. We are talking about those big topics: slope, understanding linear functions, understanding slope-intercept form, understanding the intercepts, understand how they play together. Inverse functions is a big one for my students. That used to really bottleneck and take up some of my time. I found some better ways to teach inverse functions that I can't wait to share with you. And then also the translations of linear graphs using function notation. So the function notation with the translations can be kind of tricky to some of the students if they haven't really got a solid understanding of what function notation is, if they're just writing it but they don't understand it. So there are a lot of things in this unit that they need to master and really get down pat, get down into their memory. I would like to point out, for example, the Common Core standard functions, which is interpreting functions. Number 7A says graph linear and quadratic functions and show the intercepts, maximum, minima. So when we're teaching this linear functions unit, the first thing I want you to remember is that we're not going to be dealing with any of the quadratics. So a lot of these standards that are included in this unit, we are not going to be doing if they say they need to understand the difference between exponential growth and linear. While we might reference it because they've had that introduction, we're not expecting mastery yet of that content. So the first thing I like to do when I am teaching this content to make it feel smaller for the students and to help them to make those connections within their brain is I like to remind them of what they've already learned. So in the high school I taught at, or the 8th grade was a little bit easier because I was in the same building with those 7th grade teachers. So I knew the language they were using with the kids. I knew how they were teaching certain things. But once I moved up to the high school, so my whole career has basically been 8th and 9th grade. So once I moved up to 9th grade, I kind of lost that in the building closeness with those other teachers. Now all my students were coming from 3 different middle schools with 3 different demographics. They were also coming from a number of charter schools as well as the inner city schools. Our district was right at the end of the bus line. So we got a lot of the inner city kids. So in any of my classrooms, I had from 6 to 8 middle schools or 8th grade curriculums that they were coming from. On top of that, I had ESL students, which is English as a second language, which was ESS or ELL, depending on what state you live in. So all of those things really play into it. We also had refugees who were very good at math but didn't have the English. So there was a lot of play there. And so what I had to figure out what to do is figure out how to connect what we were learning to what they've already learned. So I started asking those 8th grade teachers, I started asking the students, did your teacher say it this way or this way? You know, if you think of slope and how many different ways there are to teach slope, some people are like rise over run, some people talk about the staircase and on and on and on, you know, filling in the bucket, you know, like a cylinder bucket would be a linear relationship. And so we can, teachers taught it. And so I would try to give 4 or 5 different examples and then say, how did your teacher teach it? Because some of the kids, when I said, hey, let's talk about slope, what happened is I'd say, remember rise over run? And I'd get about half the kids. So you kind of feel pretty good about that. Well, the other half, you know, one of the teachers where they were coming from always used a stairway, and she did this huge project which gave them a great understanding of slope, but when I said rise over run, it meant nothing to them. So I just had to really do some investigation and make sure I connected it to what they already knew. That goes for a lot of the different subjects. The other thing that I took a look at, excuse me, I do have my notes here because being live does put me a little teeny bit on edge, is I connected it to what we learned in Unit 1. So in Unit 1, we did a lot with function notation. We did a lot with understanding the difference between the different functions. We understood what function notation talked about and what it stood for. And so I tried to connect anything that was recent, Unit 1, so they don't have to go too far back in their memory to what we're going to learn this time as well. And then I also looked at the language in other classes. So in the biology, for my school, they taught biology in 9th grade and algebra 1 in 9th grade for the most part. Now there are some kids who are above and below, but for the most part, almost probably 90% of our students took biology and algebra 1 together. So I would actually take a look at what the biology teachers were teaching. They were teaching domain and range, for example, with these linear functions, but they were using input and output. So why don't we all use the same language and help the students really get a very deep, in-depth understanding rather than using just separate language where they don't get the connection. So as soon as I started making those connections, the kids didn't feel like they had so much to master before that unit test. So how I prevented losing struggling students is I really worked on the connections. I really tried to connect it to things outside of school. If they struggle in school, though that's kind of a block for them, they're not going to really want to connect it. And so I would try to connect it to things outside of school where they were successful. We may talk about running down the basketball court. Obviously I say shooting the baskets. I brought in my iPad and we did a lab with that. That's going to be in exponentials. Not exponentials, I'm so sorry, quadratics. But then we also, I also remind them how their brain works. So when I see a student struggling, I like to remind them that it will feel easier tomorrow when we talk about this. That they need to, what a struggle is going to feel like. And I couldn't believe I actually saw that on Facebook and shared it on our page just about an hour or two ago. What's it look like when you are struggling? What's it going to feel like when you're struggling? How do you behave when you're struggling? How do you not behave? And on that poster, if you look on my Facebook page, I'll see if I can pull it up. But they actually say, don't cry, don't hide, don't ask to go to the bathroom. I thought those were really applicable and really great for high schoolers. What do? You read about it. You look, if it's the person who wrote this obviously had computers in the classroom. You look on this website or you look on this website. You ask a neighbor. You do. And she gave them really strict strategies so that when they felt stuck, they knew what to do. They just didn't stay stuck. Because it's okay to struggle if you work through it. She also defined struggling as the time when the most learning goes on. And struggling is when I haven't helped you, and she put ... yet. I shouldn't say she. I'm not sure who wrote it, but I thought it was a great poster and something that we should all implement in our classroom. It really helps those kids who struggle a lot not get so frustrated. So the other thing that we are going to want to do is make connections actually on the paper, so when they're working. So I'm going to click over and do a screenshot and show you a little bit about what I see for some of my students. And I'm going to give you these. I am going to give you these handouts. At the end, I'll show you where we can find them. So I just saw a comment here. It's quite old. I hope, Dan, you're still on here. From Central Pennsylvania. So I am a Michigan girl, so not too far. We drive through Pennsylvania actually quite a bit. So this is within the membership area, but so if you're a member, you'll know where to find it. So we're going to go into week 6, linear equations. I really like to stress a lot right off the bat when I'm teaching other things as well as the content, because some of it should be review. Some of it should work out. So I'm going to go into week 6, and we are talking about inverse functions. So I've got day 26. We have the cricket activity. So can they write that a linear function with a cricket activity? So most students around here have had that irritating cricket in their bedroom, in their campsite, wherever that would be. And so what I like to do is there is this basic formula that a lot of people use for relating the temperature in Fahrenheit to the cricket chirps per minute. And I do tell them, and I make it really clear, this is a estimated linear function. Crickets, they're actually not. And so I will bring this up a little bit later with the students and do it again as they get more. But I love to show them what it looks like for linear. Now the other thing that I think is even more powerful, got my notes over here, is I really like to, I'm just going to open both of these up real quick. We'll close the crickets. I love to show students how everything connects. So this is one of the practice pages that I like to give with inverse functions. So I'm not sure if, let me make it a little bigger so it fills up your screen. I hope that makes it a little bit easier to see for you. So what I did is kids always struggled with inverse functions in my classroom. And the normal just switch the X and Y obviously doesn't work because they don't understand what they're doing or why they're doing it. They're just going through the steps. So as soon as we're done with that, they forget it. So there's no retention there. There's no way for the students to really connect it to anything they've already learned. So the first thing that I really like to do is I talk to our English teacher, but you could do this as well. Technical writing is definitely one of those Common Core, if you're a Common Core state still. It's definitely one of those things that's going, I'm just checking for more comments there. I see a couple more coming through. But Common Core is definitely, technical writing is so good, and we can use this as math teachers to our advantage. So they need to be able to write directions. They need to be able to write like an instruction manual. And so that technical writing is something that the English teacher really needed to do. So what her and I did is we tag teamed. So what she had them do is sit in their desk, and she had them get out one piece of paper, and they had to write directions down to the office. So if you're sitting in my room and you get out of your desk, you start as you walk out the door. So you walk out the door, you turn right, you go down the hall, you see the stairs, you go down the stairs, you turn left, and then you take a quick right, and then the office is on your left hand side. Now, then what she had them do is get out a clean sheet of paper. She wanted 2 separate sheets of paper so that they could kind of not get a look ahead when they were going to walk back. She really wanted them to learn from their mistakes, right? The experience is the best teacher. So then she, while they're still sitting in their desk and they haven't walked it, she said, now I want you to write the directions back, and you need to be very clear. So they wrote them going back. And, you know, if they turn left into the office, a lot of the kids wrote, you turn left out of the office. Like they just weren't able to kind of turn it around. But then we walked it. So she walked it with her students. She said, now she gave them like clipboards or whatever they had to write on. Now fix it. Make it more specific. Make your writing better. She had them skip lines. So how many steps are you going to walk? How far till you turn? What degree turn are you going to take? Because our school's kind of at angles. It might have been like a 60-degree turn or a 30-degree turn, you know, whatever that is. So she had them get real specific. And anything they did wrong, she made them fix. Well, on the going from the office back up, they had to follow the directions. And some of them ended up in the parking lot outside the office. You know, and luckily we have a great security staff that will help us with lessons. Sent them back in, and they had to correct it. You know, what had to change here? If I go out of the office, which way do I go? And they realized that everything was backwards from how they did it the first time. So every right turn was now a left turn. Every downstairs was now an upstairs. You know, and that now then the next day I had them come in to the room, and when I say switch the X and the Y, they understand, right? Instead of sitting at their desk in that room, they're now in the office giving directions. And so that was really, really powerful. So when I went to teach it, that you switch places and have to figure it out from the other direction, it made sense that everything came out opposite. So when they did inverse functions, we did that. They did it the day before. Then I gave them this practice page. So I had them write the directions. And then I have them have the numbers. So they know how to do it from the directions from being in Miss Smith's class, and they should understand this. And this is allowing me to deal with anybody who'd been absent the day before, or still, she warned me, a couple of the kids were still confused. So I walked around and helped those students. And then we did the same thing now with numbers. And I said, now what pattern are you seeing? We did all those connections. Well, guess what? My students never forgot inverse functions. I never had to reteach inverse functions. And then once we were done with this sheet, we went right in to dealing with some of the numbers. Why are inverse functions important? Why are they useful? How can you figure this all out? And then I had them come up with some different exercises. So then we talked about the function notation. Hey, do you want to write that out every time? Find the inverse of this function, or do you want a shorthand? So we got a shorthand, and now they understand what they're going to do here. It wasn't a long stretch. They didn't get confused by the notation. And so these are the kind of things with each lesson we can do. We can help them make connections between when they're going to use it, how they can use it. And that way when they see something that looks so overwhelming, my students used to get so overwhelmed with this notation that they would shut down. Well, now they had the connection. There was no overwhelm. They were able to move from one item to the next. So as you work through your linear functions, if you are needing, if you would like this whole inverse functions lesson plan, we have this for you. I also saw before Terry Ann is in Phoenix City, Alabama. My students struggle with everything, not just linear functions. Seems like they forget how to graph a coordinate. I would do my best to figure out what video games they work with, because a lot of times those video games use coordinates. My son kept getting it confused, and he's very young, but he loves Minecraft, and he loves figuring out why it works, and he wanted to create his own video game. And the video game creator, it's a free one. I'll have to look up what it is. But he is 8 and was able to figure it out. But he had to understand coordinates. He had to understand which one is first. Well, when you make it, it has to go on the x-axis. It has to go horizontal first. Everything moves horizontal first and then vertical. So it made sense to him that he was going to put that value first and then the second value. And he was able to remember that and retain it really, really well once he had that experience. So I'm not sure if your kids would be, your students I should say, but I call them my kids so I forget sometimes. But your students might really relate to that, and it may really help them. And it might be worth giving them 15 minutes of figuring some of those things out. Sometimes giving them a little bit of time, it's like you spend time to gain time. So once these are done here with the inverse functions, we graph them, because then they're going to see what happens every single time when you graph them. So now they're going to be able to figure out and make the connections with the slope. Now they're going to need my help with that jump. They're going to go through a time of struggle, and I might talk to them about it. You're going to struggle with this next part. A lot of you will struggle with this next part, but I will help you through it. So don't stay struggled. What are you going to do? We're going to look it up. We're going to figure it out together. And so that's a really powerful thing. So when you're going through linear functions, for me personally, linear functions for this is only 3 weeks long. And when you think about how much you're covering in 3 weeks, it's a lot. It's a lot. And the test is a lot. And so if we go up here, oops. And I look at that pacing chart, and you look at everything that needs to be taught, it can be really, really overwhelming. So let's open this. Oops, it jumped on me. So when I look at this Unit 2 complete package, it's kind of, I'm going to, let's see. There we go. So it's kind of long, but I'm going to go right to this pacing guide here. So don't get dizzy here as I scream through. But when I start looking at all these weeks, I know what I'm going to cover. I've got that objective. I've got my average rate, and I've got my slope with those intercepts, and I've got it broken down step by step. And then I think, what is the best way to teach it? Now, let's talk about a couple ways before we jump off how to save time for you as the teacher. We talked about saving time, helping the students understand it. But the biggest thing I can say for you is automate what you can. So if your school allows you to use a tool like Socrative, I do have a blog post about that. If you go to my website, let's just go here, and you'll see up in this menu bar, and you click that search, you can type in Socrative or Socrative. I'm not sure how they pronounce it there at their company, but Socrative.com. You are going to see how to use that. But you can get that to really help you automate the grading. So what I would do is I would put the answers for 4 random questions. So if I gave homework and it's 20 questions, I might pick like number 2, one of the very basic ones right at the top. You know, those ones that we just give them to make sure that they know the algorithm and how to work it. So I might give them number 2, number 5, number 10, and one near the end, number 19. And it grades those 4 questions. And what I like to do is that for each one of those, they get 10 points if they get it correct. And if they complete everything, they get 60%. That way I've got my effort and my accuracy in my homework grades. Most parents support me. My administrator supported me that I was spending more time one-on-one helping kids who did not get those 4 questions than I was spending time grading every single problem. So for me, that worked really well. And then that went in the grade book, and the parents were told how it was graded. So if your student got a 60%, they did all the work, they worked hard, don't come down on them. They really didn't understand it. I'm probably going to pull them in at lunch. Please know it's not a punishment. I just don't want your child to get behind. And that really sped it up because the students also knew that I had time to pull them in before, after school, at lunch. They tried really hard to get them right. They didn't want to lose that social time with their friends, especially your at-risk students. They do not want to lose that social time, except for that 1%. You've always got 1 or 2 who are going to want every minute with you that they can get because their home life is sad. But other than that, for 95% of them, they don't want to spend their lunch with you. They'd rather be with their friends. And so it does help the motivation of getting it done, of getting it correct. So that was one huge time saver. I could actually, I put it on Socrative. It would tell me how many they got correct. I collected the papers, and just as long as they got them all done, I added, the 60% to it. And then I was done grading very, very, very quickly. So Socrative will actually download an Excel sheet with their name on it and give you everything you need. So that's one tip. The other thing is have a routine for your classroom. You absolutely must have a routine because that way the students know what to expect every day. They come in ready for their bell ringer. They know you're not going to end at the end of the classroom, that you're going to give them an exit slip. Again, that exit slip, the same thing as me pulling them in at lunch, knowing that you're going to check that every day, makes them pay attention a little bit longer because there's accountability for what they've learned. They can't be passive in your classroom. So when you prevent them from being passive, you can just cover more information all the time. When you get them to be active learners, it always helps. So I hope this was really, really helpful for you. You are going to see down in the comments, I'm going to make sure it's pinned right here, make sure there were no other questions that I missed. Let's see if I can get it pulled back up here. There we go. And those students. Oh, I apologize. Now you can hear me. You don't need to hear me twice. So I just wanted to see the comments, but it's not going to allow me to do that. Oh, there we go. So, so in Facebook, what I did was I'm just pinning, there it goes. So it didn't pin earlier. That's what I was concerned about. What I did is the very first comment, now I just pinned a link. And what that link does is it will take you to a page that looks like this if you want that inverse functions lesson plan. It also gives you 9 additional lesson plans. I created a page with 10 lesson plans on it so you can get those. If you'd like that, just go ahead and click that link and you can go ahead and enter your name and email. I just send you a link because it would be so many files. It would bog down my server sending that to a lot of people. And then once you click that, I'll send you, the email gets sent almost instantly. I think it takes 3 or 4 minutes, usually 3 to 5, depending on your school email server, because it's going to check it for spam because it's coming automated. I didn't want you to have to wait for them. But the catch-22 on that is if you don't see it, your school may have caught it because it's an automated email spam. So just drop me a Facebook message or drop me an email, and I'm always happy just to send you the link so you can download those. And you get 9 additional emails with those, lesson plans with those. So go ahead and take a look there. And if you ever have questions, you're going to see right in the blue. It doesn't show up good on that video, but I do have my email address right here at the top, or my Facebook, Twitter, or Google+. I'm mostly on Facebook or my email. Twitter for me gets a bit overwhelming. So I just don't spend as much time as I probably should there because there's so much good information out there nowadays, but I gotta cut it off somewhere. So thank you so much for joining me today. I am so glad you were able to make some time. I know 2:30 is not optimal time, but what I kept saying, I need to do these in the evenings, and then my family obligations just kept getting in the way. And so I'm just going to be popping on here doing these whenever it works well in our family schedule, because like my kids have Lego League tonight and they're building robots and they're so excited, and I definitely want to be there for that, as you can understand. So I'll be popping in a lot of emails and questions. Will these be posted somewhere else? Yes, I will put this on my website so that if you're here now, you're not going to need this, but that way, if Facebook should be blocked, or you're at school that day and it's blocked or whatever, these videos will go right onto my website. And then if you hit the follow button below, you'll be notified. And then in your Facebook